the Life Science Connections Let's Talk Careers online event. This is our second event. And the whole purpose of this event is to provide insight into the many different careers within the life science and allied health field. And I know that from experience, things like this weren't really around. And I know how helpful this could be, hence why we decided, to make these online events as regular as possible. So in this event, we have Alice. Alice, she is a genetic counselor. We have Karimah. She is a clinical embryologist. And we also have me, Aderonke, and I am a quality assurance officer. There were three other speakers who were meant to be on today, but unfortunately they weren't able to make it to this event. But we will definitely try to get them on again. But I'm definitely sure that we have more than enough information and insight that we can offer you in this event today. I guess the only housekeeping rule that I can say is just please make sure that you are on mute. And if you have any questions that you want to ask, you can send a message in the chat. And during the Q&A session, we will read out the questions for you. And even during the Q&A session, if you do have any questions that come to mind, then you can raise your hand and we will unmute you so that you can ask your questions then as well. But yeah, I hope you guys have your notepads. There's going to be some great information, some great insight for you. And I think, yeah, we will get started. So the first speaker is Karimah Douglas, and she will be speaking about her career or her journey to her career as a clinical embryologist. Oops, sorry, I need to share my screen. Please let me know if you can't see the slides. But yeah, Karimah, over to you.
Great, thanks Aderonke. Hi, good evening everyone. I hope you're all well. My name's Karimah and I'm a clinical embryologist working in London. Just going to give a very quick presentation, a run through of how I ended up where I am now. And at the beginning of my journey, I didn't even know what a clinical embryologist was. So just to give you a little bit of background into how I got here and what you need to do if it's something that you are also interested in. Next slide, please. Great. So my background, I did my undergraduate degree at St. George's Medical School in London. At the time, I was 100% sure I wanted to go into medicine and go into gynecology. I'd always been interested in women's health, but had little sort of work experience at the time due to age and rules about sort of going into hospitals and getting real work experience. So it was all sort of circumstantial and anecdotal. And so doing my undergrad degree in that environment really just gave me a breadth of knowledge and sort of exposure to help me on my way in terms of making decisions about how to move forward. And during that time, I realized that medicine wasn't for me, but my sort of interest in reproductive health hadn't changed. I needed to find a different direction, which I found during the course of that undergraduate degree. We had various sort of talks by people in different fields, and we had a clinical embryologist come in to speak to us. From that point on, I then went and got as much work experience as I could. It wasn't easy and often meant sort of a million no's before you got a yes, but it was essential for me to be sure about whether I wanted to embark on a career in this field or not. So I went straight into a master's in reproductive science and women's health at UCL after that, completely sure that I wanted to eventually go into clinical embryology, but I wanted to have a sort of greater breadth of knowledge before I embarked on that, and to learn more about the field of IVF, and fertility, and just reproductive science as a whole. So I did that immediately afterwards and applied for the NHS Scientist Training Program during that year, and was lucky enough to be offered a position. And that meant doing an additional master's in clinical science, which with a specialism in embryology, and also starting a 3-year training program to qualify as well. Next slide, please. Great, thank you. So as I said, my undergraduate degree was in biomedical sciences. I just realized that thinking about the lifestyle that I envisaged for myself, I didn't see medicine being sort of the route I wanted to continue trying to take. But I'd done a degree, gone into a degree that was very, very broad, and initially that was a little bit daunting. You know, I remember going to the careers advisors and they said, you know, well, you can do anything with a biomedical sciences degree. And I sort of thought, what is everything? You know, there are so many jobs out there that I had absolutely no idea even existed at this point. And I did feel a little bit lost for a while. So what Aderonke said about having these events where, you know, you have a platform to hear about what people do and their route into it, is just so important and insightful, even if it doesn't end up being, you know, related to something that you are interested in going on to do, but just to increase your knowledge base about what is around and what is out there, and to spread the word, really. So for me, that was a big thing. And as I said, the degree gave me sort of a scope for direction, and I just geared everything that I could towards the areas I was interested in, and was lucky enough to do a research project that, although it was not linked to reproductive science in the way that I had imagined, it gave me a really good understanding of research and its importance in science, and also the fact that, you know, specialisms tend to link in ways that you just hadn't imagined before, and the Sdp program really sort of hones in on that in terms of the structure, which I'll go into later. Next slide, please. So my master's at UCL, by this point I was firmly sure that I wanted to be a clinical scientist in embryology. And I think it's important to say at this stage, you know, really look into the specifics of what that role would entail. In terms of having a patient-facing role, embryology is one of the more patient-facing clinical scientist roles that there are. We have patient contact every day, and there are some specialisms where that's not the case, which is, you know, perfectly fine. But in terms of just working out what it is that you actually want from a career, and getting those sort of fine details and getting the experience to know what really will be expected of you when you do embark on that journey. So again, this was fully based around reproductive health, and all of the sort of key modules, and also my project, which was carried out in an IVF unit, were very strongly linked in that area, which gave me a really good footing in terms of applying for the STP, which is a hugely competitive program. Next slide, please. So I applied in my master's year and was lucky enough to be offered a position in Coventry. It's a full-time program, it's 3 years, and you have on-site practical training. So you eventually become, you know, a complete member of the lab team, and you sort of learn on the job as you go, and also complete a part-time master's degree whilst you're doing that. And the 3 years just covers everything that you need to cover, sort of practical skills as well as written assessments, etc., to ensure that you are going to be competent enough to be considered a suitable candidate for state registration, to be a clinical scientist able to make clinical decisions. And again, that encompasses sort of a part in research as well. And the process really just helped me understand the role of research in IVF, which again is something that I hadn't really given very much thought to prior to embarking on this journey. Next slide, please. So the application process, they are in the process of changing the way that this does come about. However, I think the key points still stand. Make the most of everything that is around you. When I was at UCL, I went to their careers advisors and asked them to look at my application. None of them had any idea what a clinical embryologist was, but they're very well trained in assessing whether you can answer a question well. And the questions in the application for the STP are very generic, and you need to make your answers very, very specific. And in addition to that, you know, everybody who's actually applying for the STP in embryology really wants to be a clinical embryologist. It's currently the only real route in the UK in terms of getting there, and therefore you need to find a way of standing out, which can be quite difficult when, you know, it is so competitive. There were 8 places in my year nationally, and everybody is on a similar page. So I would say, you know, use whatever you have around you. If you're currently at a university and you have a careers advisor or a careers group, do see them, but also think about the support you can gain from the people around you. You know, the lecturers that you have, any guest speakers that you have, you know, ask, and people will quite often go out of their way to help you if they see that you're willing. But I think it's just a case of putting yourself out there. And for me, that's something I did find difficult. Networking is not something that comes naturally to me, but I can tell you it is just so important in so many fields. So definitely points to consider. Next slide, please. So I obviously did the STP in embryology, but this is just showing you the range of, and there is just, if you just click one more time, there is another branch as well there. Thank you. This is just a range of specialisms that were available in 2020. So, you know, have a look. There is quite possibly something for everyone who is interested in going into a career in clinical science. And I would say, you know, really have a look at the job descriptions that are available on the NHS STP website. See if you can get work experience, and just consider all of the options and see if this is something that maybe would work for you or that you would be interested in. I just know so many people who didn't know that this was a possibility, and you know, I just think it's lovely that they're able to offer such a breadth of different specialisms in terms of clinical science as a whole. Next slide, please. And then, just as I said, a little bit about the structure of the Sdp program. So it is a 3-year program. In your first year, although they have made some changes since, but in your first year, you spend some time away from your specialist unit, and you actually go and visit departments that are deemed to be important and relevant in some way to your specialism. And I remember, you know, initially being really frustrated by that and thinking, you know, I want to be a clinical embryologist, and you know, I'm spending a year of my training not in embryology. So I went to histology, genetics, cytology, and andrology. And it was very, very, very valuable. You know, there is obviously the immediate link with genetics for me in terms of working in IVF, but actually seeing how cytology and histology, you know, can be relevant to what I do every day, and what our patients go through, is really valuable. And the aim of the STP is to create well-rounded clinical scientists who have, you know, specialist knowledge in their area, but also have knowledge in other areas as well. So the program really does, it does provide you with, you know, many skills, and I think there is something to be taken from all the experiences on it, for sure. As I said before, there are a range of sort of practical assessments as well as written assessments, and you also have time in Manchester for your academic study for your masters. And then in your second year, you start sort of more detailed clinical training, increased workload in the lab, and you know, as you become more useful, you become, you know, more of a sort of integral member of the team, and that brings its own challenges in terms of you know, managing your workload in the program. But that's all going to be very, very valuable experience for, you know, juggling post SCP, and how your sort of life and career changes when you do get to that stage. And then your final year is finishing your clinical training, completing all of the aspects of the academic side, and also you have an elective period where you spend up to 6 weeks out of your unit somewhere else, sort of related to what you do. So I spent some time, maternity ward. People go off and look at IVF in different countries, go to genetics labs, etc. Just, anything that interests you, that allows you to, again, just get a different experience within science. And all of that is going to be useful for you moving forward. And then finally have your OSFAs, which are your final practical exams, and they decide whether you are deemed competent enough to work as a state registered clinical scientist. Next slide, please. So just a little bit of advice. I would say work experience was just so important in terms of getting a real feel for exactly what the job entailed day in, day out, and whether I could see myself in that environment. Think about your personality, and the way you like to work. The people that I have worked with or have known in embryology who have left, I can definitely say that their personalities probably didn't match quite as well with the job. With the environment. It is a very niche environment. It is very high pressured. There's time pressure constantly. You have to work very well in a team, but also independently, and it can be very emotionally draining. I think there are a range of things to sort of consider, and in order to see yourself in those shoes, if you can get sort of valuable work experience, and at least observe from the outside, I think that's very, very helpful. Again, thinking about the lifestyle that you want for yourself, and how, we all have sort of personal issues, and I think that it is important to take those things into account as well when making these decisions. And then just finally, networking, as I said before, not something that comes naturally to me at all, but something that has been extremely valuable. Embryology particularly is a very, very small world, and people want to help you, and if you put yourself out there for the right reasons, quite often you will receive help in some way, shape or form, and make those connections and links, which will be valuable for you, along your journey for sure. Next slide, please. So that's just, a very, very brief overview of my sort of journey, how I ended up where I am now. I've now been working post-training for 2 years, and my journey continues, but it's the best thing I've ever done. And the Sdp was difficult, but I absolutely love my job, and I could not imagine doing anything else. If anyone has any questions about embryology, the Sdp in general, or just careers in science, we'd be happy to take the questions after the presentations. Thanks very much for listening.
Talking on mute again. Thank you, Karimah. I think we have a question from Miriam. If we can try and keep all the questions to the Q&A session, which will be at the end, you can write your questions in the chat, and then we'll definitely read out your questions. So the next speaker we have will be myself. Brilliant. So yes. So I'll start from the beginning, how it all started. From a young age, I've always loved the sciences, just how complex the body is, and it's always just fascinated me. So I knew that I wanted to work in an area or a field that revolved around science. So I guess the main career goal for me was medicine. As you can see in this diagram, anything that I wanted to do was going to point towards me getting into medicine and becoming a doctor. So during my A-levels, after a little research, and reviewing and being real with regards to my grades, I was like, okay, I may not get into medicine from college, so I considered either studying pharmacy or biomedical science. And in the end, I ended up studying biomedical science at the University of Hertfordshire. During the course, I did apply again for medicine, but I think the main thing I was just lacking in some experience within a hospital setting. So I thought, okay, let me complete my course and then apply for medicine once I've gotten a job within a hospital and gained some patient contact experience. So I completed my course, got a 2-1 overall, and I had little to no knowledge about the career prospects or the possible career routes that I could take once I studied my degree. And the only options that were provided or that were advised were lab-based roles. And from my degree, I knew that me and lab work were not going to be friends. But in the end, I ended up getting my first role as a lab assistant, a medical lab assistant at Charing Cross. And that further encouraged my, not hatred, but I just didn't really enjoy working in a lab. It just didn't fit my personality. It didn't fit what I wanted to do. And also it wasn't providing me the patient facing experience that I required. So I ended up working as a clinical trials assistant. I stumbled into this role, and I say stumbled because I was literally applying for everything and anything to get out of my role as a lab assistant. And it was because of my my lab experience that I was able to get this role as a trials assistant. And working as a trials assistant, it opened my eyes to clinical research. And my experience within clinical research it moved me away from my desire for medicine, and obviously, and some personal things as well, just kind of moved me away from medicine, and I just continued to pursue a career within clinical research. As a trials assistant, it was mainly paper-based work, administrative work, filing, and shadowing the clinical trial coordinators and the data managers as well. And it was due to the nature of the team that I was in, I was also able to work alongside the trial coordinators and recruit patients onto clinical trials and take their bloods and things like that. So I was able to kind of dip my hands into so many different things that I was then able to get my next role as a clinical research practitioner, which involved me coordinating and managing the whole of the non-malignant clinical trials, non-malignant hematology clinical trials, and this was at the Barts Health NHS Trust. So I worked across many different hospitals under the trust, and this kind of again opened my eyes to not just the hospital side of clinical research, but also the pharmaceutical / CRO side of clinical research. And because I wanted to get a bit more knowledge, a bit more understanding of clinical research as a whole, I decided, okay, I think I've kind of hit the ceiling with what I could do or what I wanted to do within hospital-based research. So, let me venture out to pharmaceutical CRO companies. And my next role was as an ISSC associate. This was mainly to do with filing essential documents for the activation of clinical trials at different sites. It was globally, so it included EU sites as well as international sites as well, and UK sites, and just making sure that they had the necessary documentation in place before they could actually carry out the clinical research, and then going on from then, making sure that they have updated information in their folders, which is called investigator site file, and just making sure it's up to date, and that they had the necessary training and the necessary documentation to confirm that they could continue running these particular trials. And after this role, I ended up getting a role as a clinical trials coordinator at Queen Mary University, which was quite similar to my previous role, but also involved monitoring, which was my first taste of quality assurance, or somewhat quality assurance. And it just showed me the importance of quality, and how much of an impact quality has, not just for clinical research, but even just medicine as a whole, and the healthcare industry. And after this role, I worked as a compliance associate within a clinical research site company that had different sites in different areas of the UK, and even internationally. And then my current role as a quality assurance officer at UCL, within the clinical research setting. So, as I mentioned, my role as a clinical trials coordinator kind of gave me my first taste of working within quality assurance. That was a repeat. So, what is quality assurance? So, quality assurance is in clinical trials. It consists of planned and systematic activities that are conducted to make sure that clinical trials are performed, and that the trial data that is generated is documented and reported in compliance to good clinical practice, the protocol of the actual study, and also any regulatory requirements that have been put in place. There are quite a few regulatory requirements within the UK, within EU, and just internationally. So we have to make sure that clinical research sites are performing the research studies and collecting the data ethically, and we're making sure that the patient's safety and well-being and their rights as well are at the forefront of the clinical research or the clinical trials that are being carried out, and just ensuring that the data that's being collected as well is accurate, and so that when the reports come out, we're providing accurate information. And this obviously ties in with, COVID, and how the vaccine was able to come through so quickly, making sure that. So what quality assurance does is we make sure that before a drug is licensed, before a drug is marketed, we help to make sure that all the necessary regulations, all the necessary guidelines, protocols, and even in-house standard operating procedures have been followed to protect the patients, and to protect the data as well. So why I chose quality assurance, that this was not planned. When I graduated, as I said, medicine was my goal. But once I realized that it wasn't going to happen, I had to just kind of fumble around and try and figure out what I wanted to do with my degree, because I didn't want to waste all that money that I had paid for. So I was going to make sure that I made use of the degree that I had. And just through the different roles that I've worked in, I guess, quality assurance, it it kind of fit my personality. It fit what my preferred lifestyle. And yeah, I just ended up finding myself in it. But through the different roles that I had been in, quality assurance, it proved to be a big part of it. And I've written down here, there's hidden power in quality assurance. There is, from the experience that I've had, quality assurance is kind of like the unofficial top dogs. If we say something and there are guidelines to prove it, whatever we say goes, whether people on top like it or not. So yeah, and as I mentioned, as it says here again, you know, it has its place not just in clinical trials, but in healthcare as a whole. And it just, you know, it kind of shows that, you know, there will always be a place for quality assurance. So you'll always have a job. You'll always, you know, even if it's not in clinical trials and you choose to go into the NHS and work within quality within the NHS, there's always a role. There's always going to be a job for quality. Quality is a department that has been overlooked for so long, but I think now that clinical trials and even the fact that guidelines have been put in place, you know, quality assurance, sorry, has shown its importance and proved its importance. And I just feel like there is more for the future within quality assurance. So my future plans for within quality assurance is to gain more experience within different areas. So medical devices, which is obviously still in clinical research, and also lab settings as well. Getting more familiar with auditing and specializing within auditing and quality management systems, and, you know, registering as well within the RQA, which is a professional membership body for quality assurance, and I guess just growing within QA. And yeah, that's basically it for me, and those are my slides all done. Again, if you have any questions, please do write them in the in the chat, and I'll be happy to answer them at the end. Thank you for listening. So lastly, we have Alice Coulson, and she is a genetic counsellor, and she'll be going through her journey to becoming a genetic counsellor, and also sharing more about genetic counselling as well.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really nice to look back on the journey and hopefully share some lessons along the way and hear what other people have been up to as well. So I'm Alice, I'm a genetic counsellor. I work here at Guy's and St Thomas's in London, and I'm specialising at the moment in cancer genetics. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So I thought I'd kind of flip it around and start with what genetic counselling is, because it's not something that lots of people know about kind of until they need to, or maybe until they're looking into different careers. So genetic counselling is the practice of helping individuals and families understand the implications of genetic conditions. So I'm a patient-facing clinician, I have a caseload, and I work with different families and different members of even the same family to really understand what a genetic condition could mean for them. So I've tried to split it into kind of the main groups and main parts of my job on an average week. So things like genetic assessments, so kind of understanding the genetic condition in the family, how it's passed down, what the symptoms could be, and helping patients to understand that, or actually being able to make a diagnosis myself in some cases, often in collaboration with my medical colleagues. We also look into medical management, so if people need extra screening, if they're eligible for any extra treatment based on their genetic result or their genetic condition, then that's something that we can help to arrange. So I do a lot of referring on and collaborating with other healthcare specialisms. A really big part of my job, aside from the science and the medicine, is communication. So I'm trained in counselling skills, and that's where the kind of counselling aspect of our title comes from. Because we know that genetic conditions can sometimes cause all kinds of different emotions in families. It can leave people feeling many kinds of ways. So it's really important that we ensure people receive this information safely and share it with their family. I've already mentioned kind of multidisciplinary, so working with different healthcare professions. And then I think these two are really applicable to all life science careers. We do a lot of work in research, taking part in clinical research trials, or other kind of developing our service, so research to help us provide a better service. And we do a lot of teaching and leadership as well. So it's a brilliant job. I love it. I'll shout about it for days. So I hope I can convince some of you tonight that it's a good career. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So I've just kind of split this into two sections. So kind of what is the diagnosis and what is the kind of sciencey part of my job, and then also thinking in the next slide in a minute more about the kind of counselling and communication, to just kind of give you a bit of an overview. A bit of a niche job, but I'd obviously be happy to answer any questions. So this just kind of gives you an idea of what my work is when a patient comes to clinic. So they might already have a diagnosis of a genetic condition, or it might be something that's suspected. So it's important for me we take a full personal and family history, medical history. We will review medical records, particularly in cancer. I'll review a lot of tumour records, or maybe imaging, to see kind of what the diagnosis is in the patient and whether this is leading me towards a suspicion of a genetic cause for that cancer, for example. So I'll make an assessment. I might then provide information about the genes that I'm going to be testing and what that might mean for that patient. So, for example, you might have heard of the BRCA genes. So they cause an increased risk of breast and ovarian cancer. So I might talk a patient through what might be available for them if we found they did have an increased risk of developing cancer, or what this might mean for their current treatment. So I'll offer a test to them and I'll arrange that with our laboratory, and then when that result comes in, I'll interpret that and put the right management in place. So it's a lot of people think we just kind of do talky-feely stuff, which we do a lot of that, but there is also a big element of the job which is kind of medical management and making sure people are under the right care. So we think about what the diagnosis means for the patient, but also what it means for their family, because that genetic condition will not only affect the patient themselves, but could potentially affect the wider family too. And so I've mentioned here, what does it mean for families? What does it mean for if they're going to have children in the future and they're thinking about what it might be like to pass that gene on. I'm thinking about treatment, screening and support, and I'm also thinking about coordinating care and working with other healthcare professionals. So that's the kind of medical sciencey side. Next slide, please. So there we go, thank you. So this is kind of then focusing on the other part of my job, which is the kind of counselling and communication skills that we offer. So I quite like this quote. My boss shared with me this quote. I don't know where it's come from, but it says, "No one cares what you know until they know that you care." And I think that is really at the core of what we do. So having a kind of non-judgmental, positive attitude, really listening to people and everything that they've been through, really helps us to facilitate sharing of information. If you trust someone, you're a bit more likely to open up. For me to build a relationship with a patient is really important, because I'm going to ask them personal questions. I'm going to ask them about, I might ask them about their medical history that could be quite sensitive. I might ask them about their hopes and fears for the future and what this might look like if there is a genetic condition. I might be asking them about their plans to start a family, or how they're going to talk to their mum about this result. So it's really important that we give a good foundation to our relationships through these counselling skills. And often we're dealing not only with the implication of that genetic condition, so maybe the cancer diagnosis or something like that, but we're also thinking about other emotions such as anxiety, guilt, shame, regret, and just helping patients work through and have somewhere to go to talk these things through. Often genetic conditions are very rare, so when we're looking at some conditions, for example, genetic conditions of metabolism or something like that, it can be a really long road to diagnosis, and children can be really unwell for a long time before they actually get a name to their condition. And so for them to come to genetics where people have heard of their condition and understand what it means for them and their family can be really beneficial. Obviously, we also think about how these conditions affect entire families, and often people come with a history of bereavement or illness, or in some way they've been touched by what's been going on in the family. So we are there to listen. There can be a lot of uncertainty. So even when we have a genetic diagnosis, sometimes we can't predict the future. So we also want to support people in adjusting to that. I've put some more things here about common things we come across with our patients. So, the concept of having a risk of something in the future when you're well now can be quite hard to get your head around. And then making decisions about your health based on that can be quite an alien concept for some people. So we're there to make sure we are providing support and guidance. We signpost people onto support groups. We get them sort of hooked up in various care pathways that mean that they can make those decisions safely and move forward and enjoy life. In order to do that, we kind of have our sciencey training, so we understand the genetic conditions, but then we also have our counselling skills training as well. So we work in different models of counselling for emotional support, for decision making and family communication. So those skills are really there to help us facilitate our job. We're not a kind of therapeutic counsellor in the sense of any treatment for any sort of psychiatric illness, but these skills are useful across all aspects of life. So particularly in genetics, we really value those skills to help our patients out. Next slide, please. So how did I get here? So this is a little bit about my journey and some things at the bottom that didn't work out. So I started with a human biology degree in Loughborough, 10 years ago now, wow. And in that time, I really enjoyed genetics and I also really enjoyed psychology. And those two things I didn't really see how they were going to link up at the time. So I did my dissertation looking at kind of public perception of genetic testing. You know, how would you feel if we could look into your health future in your genes and that kind of thing. And I got really excited by how people reacted and the kind of social and ethical issues that brought up. I was then doing some Googling. I remember it really clearly, doing some Googling one day while I was supposed to be revising for an exam. And I came across this master's programme at the Institute of Psychology, Psychiatry and Neuroscience, which is at King's in London. And it was a course that looked at the genetic, environmental and developmental aspects of psychiatric conditions. So we learned about things like how much of depression can be explained by genetic factors. It's somewhere in the region of 40%. And then the rest of it is usually explained by lifestyle or environment factors. And we have really clever statistical ways of working this out. So I spent a year there and really, really enjoyed kind of getting down with the data and finding out and sort of putting patterns in and looking at really large data sets to see if we could find any correlations, any patterns with particular psychiatric conditions and particular sets of genes. I really enjoyed that, but what I realised through kind of, I guess, just the process of working with different people was that I'm a huge chatter and I really love bigger picture thinking and I love feelings and ethics and kind of thinking about what this means for a patient. I remember always asking, what does this mean for my patient? What does this mean for a group of patients in that hospital over there if I do this, you know, if I do this statistical analysis? So I kind of from there thought, actually, I don't think I want to do anything with data. I think I need to be in front of people and helping them, basically. So I got a job as a research assistant at a bioresource, and a bioresource is a kind of big research study where DNA samples are collected from patients with particular health conditions, and then they can be called upon by other clinical researchers to use that data in their large studies. So genetic studies need huge amounts of data, so we would collect tens of thousands of samples in this bioresource to help out. So my job there was doing things like going into inpatient wards. So I'd spend time in eating disorder units or on psychosis wards, talking to patients about getting involved in research and then taking their blood and getting them onto that. And I had really interesting conversations with patients on those units. They asked me all about genetics. They asked me why we were doing this. They asked me how it would help them. I absolutely loved having the opportunity to, you know, contribute to their journey in a really small way, just by listening and just by being there and acknowledging that there was lots of their situation that was out of their control and that part of this could be genetic and that there was hope for the future. And, you know, maybe one day we could give them the best possible treatment in the fastest possible time by looking at their genetic information. And we're definitely finding out more and more now that we are able to do that. So from there, I kind of came across the Sdp program, and Karimah gave a really good overview of the Sdp. So thank you so much. So I hope that gives you a little bit of an idea of how that program looked. The structure for me was very, very similar, but obviously I was just training as a genetic counsellor instead. So in order to get onto that program, I took a kind of a year to really get some experience. in kind of counselling skills, in working with vulnerable people, and as Karimah said, really getting a sense of what this job was and whether it was the right place for me. And I was successful on getting onto that programme in 2017. I trained for 3 years here at Guy's Hospital and I finished last year. And kind of through my training, I really ended up focusing a lot more on the cancer genetic side of things. So genetic counsellors are now sort of moving out into different specialisms. So some of us might work in cardiac genetics, some of us work in neurological genetics, eye genetics, all kinds of different things. But it was really the cancer genetic side of things that was pulling me. I kind of got involved in some specialist clinics helping women with breast and ovarian cancer risk genes, and just kind of it just took off from there, and I was really, really lucky to be offered a job last year to stay here permanently, and I'm really enjoying it. So that's kind of my journey. I guess started on one path and now we've ended up here. And the things at the bottom, I just wanted to highlight that this was not necessarily a smooth journey for me, and I guess it's coming back to the points that we've made about trying new things and just kind of taking things as they come, I guess. So I did apply for a PhD in more kind of statistical genetics at Cardiff. I got the PhD and then I freaked out for 3 days and I turned it down. And at the time that felt like a really stupid thing to do, but actually I'm so pleased I did it, because I think my gut told me it wasn't right. And it was after that that I really thought genetic counselling is really what I want to do. And you'll see on the far right, I had tried to apply to it earlier, but I hadn't got on because I didn't have enough experience. So I took another shot at it and made sure this time I really tailored my experience. I applied for so many research assistant applications and vacancies, and made sure that I was really asking for feedback, because it was something I didn't get a lot of. So emailing people and asking for feedback on my applications until I got my job at the Bioresource. And I also applied for the Civil Service Fast Stream because that looked like a really interesting graduate programme. I didn't get as far on that, but it was a really good experience into the world of kind of large graduate schemes, which the Sdp is. So just a few of my sort of training and skills and experiences. I would really recommend, if you want to come into genetic counselling or anything patient facing or clinical, that you get some experience with the sort of vulnerable patients that you might be working with. So I spent some time at the Queen Elizabeth Foundation for Disabled People, working with people with brain injuries, and then at the Kangaroos Club, which is local to where I was living in Sussex, where we had play schemes for children with complex needs. Obviously, my experience at the Bioresource was really helpful. I took a counselling skills course at City Lit, which is in central London. So that really gave me an opportunity to see if counselling was for me, because I realised then there's a big difference between being a chatty person and being a listening ear and actually actively engaging in those skills. So I would really recommend that. Obviously, my training on the Sdp through the National School gave me lots of experience, and I spent some time with the Genomics Education Program too, who are aiming to upskill all of the workforce in genomics, but also encourage people in. So they've got lots of different careers, opportunities and advice as well. Next slide, please. So I just came up with some top tips, and I think they've been echoed already, so I'll just run through them. I think the important thing is you don't have to pick one thing and stick to it. I always thought I had to, hence why turning down that PhD felt like such a big deal to me at the time. But looking back, it was 100% the right decision. And it felt scary for a few days. And then I thought, you know what, this is a really good opportunity for me to nail down what it is I want to do. So what is important to you? Is it talking to people? Is it, and I guess this comes back to kind of the personality thing that we talked about before, and the lifestyle. What feels important? Is it working with data? Is it being in a lab? Is it talking to people? Genetic counselling is a fairly friendly profession in the sense that it's many women who are very, very supported in having families. So if planning to have children in the future, it's something I know I'd be supported in. I can work in different cities across the UK, potentially across the world, depending on your registration. So that was really important to me as well. As was the opportunity to be constantly challenged. So by having different areas of my job, I feel like I'm always going to be learning, and I love meeting patients, so it was the right thing for me. Just send emails. I sent so many emails. I messaged people on LinkedIn. I got on Twitter. I asked for connections. That was how I got invited to do this today. So I think getting out there and getting your name known, there's no harm in asking. So I found that really helpful. And I think just showing enthusiasm and being flexible, you know, showing that you've done your reading about someone's job, and being flexible if they're able to offer you any experience, and keep up to date with the latest developments in the field that you want to go into. So if you can get on a free conference, a webinar, when these are back to being in person, it's going to be really really good to kind of go up to someone at a free conference and say, hi, like, I really enjoyed your talk. I definitely did that to someone who I didn't realise was so big in genetic counselling, and I just kind of chatted away at her. But when I saw her at a conference a few years later, it was really handy. I don't know if these slides are getting sent around, but if you are interested in genetic counselling, we are having a virtual taster day. So there's an email there if you do want to join. We do a half day of talking about the career, applications, experience, and a bit of skills practice as well. So please do reach out. Next slide. That might be it. Oh yeah, and just some useful links. There's a couple of different ways to be a genetic counsellor. You don't just have to do the scientist training programme. There's an option to study up in Glasgow for 2 years, or there's a distance kind of online learning course at Cardiff where you can do kind of block release. So you go to Cardiff for a few weeks and then you have a placement in your local genetic service. So that's definitely worth looking into. And then a few more places for education and to find out more about families living with genetic conditions. Next slide, please. Oh yeah, and thanks for listening. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. And thank you so much for having me.
Talking again on mute. It's my favorite thing to do. Thank you so much, Alice. That was really insightful, really helpful. So I'm going to hand the Q&A session over to Tolu, and she will be reading out your questions.
Hello, everyone. Just wanted to say thank you again to our speakers for a great job. I really enjoyed your presentations. And to everyone who's also attended this far and stuck it out. I know it's a Friday evening. I don't know if we've all got better things to do, but even if you did, thank you for coming along. So yeah, just going to quickly go through some questions in the chat. So what I'll do is everyone actually got a direct question. So I'll just run through those and then the speaker can answer that directly. And then there are a few questions which I think are quite general that we have, and then we can just answer them in the order of speaker. So Karimah first, Aderonke, and then Alice. Alrighty. So first on the first question is for Karimah, and Mariam asked, what type of personality do you think is desirable for your field?
I think somebody who most embryologists are just a little bit OCD. That's probably the best way that I can describe it. Attention to detail, I would say, is one of the biggest things in my job role. And if you don't have good attention to detail, that is something that you will struggle with. And I think aside from that, being a big team player, somebody who is comfortable within themselves, working completely independently, but who also is able to work very tightly with a team, somebody who's able to deal with time pressure well, and who, in terms of stress management, I think somebody who is able to deal with stressful situations on a very regular basis, but to work through them and remain sort of calm, I suppose, and efficient, because I would say that time pressure is constant, and also somebody who is comfortable with having a lot of responsibility on their shoulders again. So that kind of comes back to being able to be self-sufficient on your own and to work calmly. So yeah, to summarize, mainly attention to detail, somebody who's able to deal with stressful situations but remain calm and efficient and effective, and who's also able to sort of adapt to various circumstances and just be flexible, and essentially work through what is needed at any given time, which tends to change very rapidly in a busy IVF unit.
Thank you so much, Karimah. Okay, so we have a question here. I believe it was for Aderonke because it came just after you mentioned this. So this is from Taimon. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. So that is, are there any planned changes from a quality assurance perspective because of Brexit?
Yes, there are. It's mainly in the regulations. So for myself, I work within clinical research. I'm not sure about the labs or any other aspects of quality assurance, but within clinical research, yes, most of the so the regulations that we will be following will be the human medicine, no, the medicines for human use legislations. That's what we will be following. But most of the regulations and guidelines that are mentioned in the UK legislations were also in the EU legislations as well. So there's not much. There's not a major change. But it's just that we will just be focusing on the UK. But if there are clinical sites, clinical research sites that are based outside of the UK, then we will be following their regulations as well as ours. And anything else? No, I think that's just the major thing within QA. It's just the switching of the legislations and just focusing on the ones that are based for UK, and then just implementing whatever EU or international sites, whatever regulations are in their countries. But that's it.
Thank you very much, Aderonke. Alice, we have a question here from Taimon again. And that is, what scientific background would it be useful to have from an undergraduate level other than learning about genetics?
Mm-hmm. Good question. People come from a huge range of backgrounds into this job. So a lot of us are sciencey background, so anything with genetics, which I think is quite a lot of life science degrees as far as I'm aware. So probably covered in biomedical science. I don't know, I assume that you do genetics in that, human biology. People have come from psychology, people have come from nursing backgrounds. We've got people who were midwives. Some kind of sciencey background in terms of an undergrad, but as long as you've taken time to learn genetics, whether that was in your undergrad or whether you took time to do a course on it, it doesn't matter too much. I think the big thing about applying for genetic counselling is it's people come from such a wide background that it's really about showing your enthusiasm and how you can apply the experience you have to the job itself. I hope that helps.
Thank you very much, Alice. Okay, so I think those are the ones, there are a couple here which, I think they would apply to everyone. So I'm just going to go for some general questions for everyone, and everyone just take a few minutes to answer. So starting with Karimah, and then Aderonke, and then Alice. Okay, so first question, what actions did you take once you graduated to help you get into your first role?
Sorry. For me, it was work experience, and that was literally just sending email upon email to every IVF unit within, that I could possibly get to, until someone said, yes, come along. That was the main thing for me in terms of being able to make my STP application stand out. Work experience was the biggest step that I took. And I also did a range of, as part of being a clinical scientist, we have to sort of undergo CPD, continue professional development, but that's something I definitely started before being qualified, and I went to a range of sort of relevant IVF events, and actually some of those were patient events, events that were actually aimed at patients, again, which I think was really useful in sort of beginning to understand the patient journey, the patient experience, and then how I would fit into that as well, particularly as a major part of my role is interacting with patients and helping them through their journeys.
For me, asking questions to anyone that would listen. Just trying to figure out, what, so first and foremost, I would say try and understand what you actually want to do. And even if you don't know, still go out to people, go on LinkedIn, go to networking events and ask people questions. Just ask them questions about, what a typical day is, just so that you can have an idea of what you'll be applying for, and what to expect. Mentors as well, I will definitely say is a key thing. That's something that I didn't do, but anyone that comes to me for advice or asks about different roles, I always encourage them to look for mentors. LinkedIn is definitely a good place. You can also you can go on hospital websites, clinical research websites, or any website that has to do with whatever field you want to get into, and send emails, contact people. But yeah, mentoring is definitely a big thing that I would encourage everyone to do.
Yeah, I guess everything everyone's saying, I would wholeheartedly agree with. I sent loads and loads of emails. I applied for lots and lots of different jobs with the kind of, I guess, the attitude that, I would get great experience from any of these jobs, and just to kind of throw myself into it, being really aware that I'm just at the start of my journey. And I think taking the pressure off yourself, this is the start of your journey. You've got so many years ahead to try different things, and I at first I put a lot of pressure on myself, and then I just thought, you know what, I'm going to try and enjoy this, try and get as much out of everything as I can. So yeah, that was good. I'm trying to think what else I did. I did some volunteer work, so I did put in some weekends volunteering with play schemes that were local, just because I knew that was kind of specific to genetic counselling. But I have found that all the volunteering and the extra stuff I did, so the counselling skills course and everything, was useful not just for my Sdp application, but for my whole life in general. So I think I had that attitude of whatever I do, it's going to help me in some form, was really helpful instead of me just trying to tick boxes. I hope that makes sense. But yeah, I found that helpful.
Thank you, ladies. And yes, on a personal note, I definitely wholeheartedly agree with volunteering. It does help, especially for experience as well, as Alice mentions. Okie dokie, thank you. All right, so Aderonke mentioned mentoring. So the question here is, has mentoring played a part in your career journey?
I would say that in some way, yes. So when I was in high school, there was a mentoring platform available. It was somebody who worked in my school who, decided that she wanted to sort of play a part in outreach, and just trying to sort of motivate and help people along on their journeys. And I had several sessions with Rebecca, and I still speak to her now. She's actually a friend. And whilst I had no idea where I would end up, having somebody to speak to about how things were going, where I wanted to go, how I was going to get there, and to kind of just talk things out, and feel supported, was exceptionally valuable. And that then led me to sort of later down the line in terms of education. I became a mentor for it was sort of a group that was again looking at children who came from sort of backgrounds where they maybe didn't get as many opportunities as we would hope, and sort of mentoring those children and encouraging those children and helping them to have the confidence to make decisions about moving forward, which I think for me, I mean, to be honest, even throughout my Sdp journey, having confidence in myself was a very big thing, and having somebody to sort of try and help you through that, I think is invaluable, really. So I would say yes, I've been on both sides of it, sort of being mentored, and also trying to be a mentor as well.
For me, I didn't really have a career mentor because, as I mentioned in my talk, I wanted to study medicine. So that was just, I kind of had tunnel vision. And that was what I wanted to do. But when, I had to I just had to be realistic and, understand that it's probably not going to happen. I, I didn't really see the importance of having a mentor until now that I do have a mentor. It kind of brings a lot of clarity. They've been through, the whole applications, process. They've been through, the getting experience process, and they can, guide you and provide insight that you probably wouldn't have if somebody who hasn't been through has shared, doesn't share it with you. So, yeah, I would say it is currently playing a big part in, the reason why I'm choosing to progress within QA. And because, working in QA now and having a mentor who is in QA who is above me is just helping me open my eyes to so many doors and so many opportunities that I definitely wouldn't have known about if I didn't have a mentor. So yeah, that's my input.
I don't think I've had a mentor kind of up until this point, really. I took a bit of a sidestep. So when I did my master's, I think everyone thought I was going down the kind of PhD and research route. So when I didn't, there wasn't really that many people around who had done that jump. But I did have a boss who was a clinical psychologist. So it wasn't quite the same as a genetic counselor, but she had the same kind of eye and clinical eye. So we did have kind of sessions together where we talk through applications and we talk through counselling skills and theories and just to try and get that language. So I guess it doesn't always need to be someone who's doing exactly what it is that you're doing if you're kind of looking for a wider skill or looking for a sidestep as such. Now I'm mentored by one of our senior genetic counsellors here. We've just kind of developed a really nice working relationship. It's kind of turned into a mentoring relationship while I've been here. And it has really opened my eyes to how that is needed for other people. So she's able to kind of direct me in the, why don't you have a look at this conference? Why don't you submit your poster here? That kind of thing. And it's been invaluable. So yeah, I think it's needed more and something I hope I can get involved in from the other side one day.
Thank you very much. All of you mentioned a bit about the STP scheme. So this question is for everyone, and it asks, what tips can you give to someone interested in applying for the STP scheme?
Sorry, I would say that one of the biggest tips would be not to sort of be complacent about any parts of the application process. So, aside from your written questions, the questions are extremely generic. Work very hard to make them as specific as you possibly can. You need to come across in the best way that you possibly can, and everybody else applying is in the same boat as you. So it's every year I offer to look through applications for master's students at UCL who are applying, and honestly every year the vast majority of the time I'm saying you haven't actually answered this question, and it is so easy to do, to just sort of think that you are, but not really deep down getting into the nitty-gritty. So take time in your application, don't rush it. You also have to do sort of online tests, theoretical reasoning and abstract reasoning. Don't assume that they'll just be things you don't have to focus on or practice, because it would be such a shame to miss out on a place just because you kind of hadn't put effort into practicing those parts of the application process. They're all important and they're all used to make the decision about who gets an interview, etc. And again, as we've said before, as much work experience as you can, and not all work experience has to be completely, not all the work experience that you do if you're applying for embryology needs to be in an IVF lab. You know, I did work experience on a maternity ward at a different hospital. I did, you know, work with, you know, children on a ward as well. You know, whatever you can get that is relevant, that shows that you have interest, that you have passion, that you have drive, and that you have commitment. I think ultimately those things are going to be valuable for your application, even if they're not sort of, you know, right on the money in terms of exactly where you're looking to go.
I did apply for the STP scheme, didn't get in. This is for clinical embryology actually, but but I didn't get in. So I don't have any helpful tips. So I'll kind of just move it on to Alice. But yeah, it was an interesting experience, I will say that.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to echo what's already been said. I think it's all about, do you know this job and what is going to be expected of you? So I think the thing that I learned the most from asking people to read my applications was, don't just list what you've done. So like, I think I found myself just like regurgitating what I'd done in a list and hoping that someone would see that that was relevant. But I think I had to stop and be like, actually, here's an experience I had with children. Actually, what I learned here was that these conditions are really hard on families. And I learned that, you know, this is the kind of support that they need. I learned how to communicate with them, and, you know, I learned what their medical needs were, or something like that. I think it was just about really pulling together what you've done and saying, I'm ready to go, and this is, and I know what to expect, and I know what that journey is going to be like. I think they also mark you for communication in your interviews, so getting confident in selling yourself, which is really, really hard, and confidence is something I've always had a problem with, but being able to sell yourself, be confident, be sure in yourself and how you're going to be a leader and how you're going to be an innovator. And that might just be practicing. And I did a lot of practice interviews and, you know, trying to sell myself to different colleagues in the department. And that was really helpful, just so it doesn't throw you on the day.
Thank you all. Very, very good advice. Okay, just a few more questions and then we'll shortly be ending the Q&A. So we've got a question here for everyone. Jasmine H. How has COVID-19 changed your everyday work life? Well, I'll let you guys answer that.
Yeah, it's changed it a lot. We have had to, I guess, I don't have a job where I can do it at home. For the most part, we adapted so that the things we could do at home, for example, patient phone calls, patient emails, some of our incubators have a camera where we can see the embryos developing and dividing. So for those patients, I can annotate embryos at home. And so we made adaptations there where we could to have people at home doing those things. But for the most part, it's actually been about ensuring that we have appropriate PPE. And they have been fantastic. You know, we have masks, we have visors, we are COVID tested every week. Patients are tested before they come into the unit. And whilst we have had positive cases, several positive cases, you know, staff and patients, as expected, because we have put in place sort of so many stringent measures, we have been able to avoid transmission within the clinic. And, you know, we've been able to isolate those cases and you know, therefore continue providing a service. During the first lockdown, the HFEA, who regulate the world of IVF, had essentially said that all IVF units had to close, which was a massive thing because the HFEA, you know, we're bound by law to them, but they don't tend to tell you what to do. They advise you what to do. And they obviously, you know, there was actually a big drive from key people in the embryology field saying, we need you to just say, we need to stop until we know more, until we have a plan, until we know we can safely provide treatment for patients. I think many argued that you know, that IVF wasn't essential. And, you know, some parts of our treatment, you know, you could argue are not essential, but we do also treat pre-chemotherapy patients. We also have, you know, a large cohort of patients over a certain age, and therefore their fertility is likely to dramatically decline. if they don't have treatment within the foreseeable future. And I think also we cannot underestimate the effect on mental health for people who are trying to conceive regardless of age. And therefore, I think you could argue that even if there wasn't, a medical urgency, that actually just stopping treatment indefinitely for patients would have a massive negative effect as well. So it's been about trying to understand our patient cohort, keep staff safe and keep patients safe as well, and still maintaining the service. So although we have made changes, and we did split teams when we first went back into the unit, the lab team had to sort of just come back. And the only other big thing that we have put into place is the lab team are effectively shielding from every other team in the unit because we can't do our job from home. So, the doctors are doing consultations from home. We've got limited number of doctors in, same with nurses. But if there's a major outbreak of COVID in the lab, what happens to all of the embryos that we have in the lab? What happens to those patients? So we're also shielding from the rest of the team as well. So yeah, they're the changes that we've had to put into place so far.
From a QA perspective, I've been working from home since March. But I guess the main thing that has been affected is all the planned audits that were meant to be in place, they've had to be postponed. But we've also had to put some risk assessments in place for sites, for clinical sites, and even for the because I work from the sponsor side of things. So, ensuring that that the trials team are performing monitoring visits remotely, making sure that if there are any quality issues or anything that that could possibly go wrong, that we have put some contingencies in place to kind of cover our backs and make sure that we're still following the guidelines, we're still ensuring that patient safety and data integrity is at the forefront of things, and just trying to keep clinical trials from our perspective afloat, and still following regulations and guidelines. But thankfully, I'm still able to work from home, still able to do a majority of my role at home, working with SOPs, working on, staff training, making sure that staff are trained appropriately and their training is up to date as well. So I can still do a majority of my role at home, but the main bulk that is affected is the auditing side. And we have put some things in place to ensure that the quality of the clinical research is still kept to a high standard.
So we are an NHS service, so we have been hugely impacted by both lockdowns. So we have converted a lot of our work to virtual, so we'll do video or telephone consultations with our patients, but we do still need to see some people face to face. So we might have to do measurements or examinations. So in that case, we get PPE'd up and we see patients in our clinic under stringent measures. Much like Karimah said, we get COVID testing a couple of times a week. We work kind of on a skeleton team in the office. So I am the on-call. So a couple of times a week, I will come in and be the go-to for all the questions, and then field out to my virtual colleagues where needed. A lot of our team have been redeployed to different parts of the hospital, so we kind of pick up other people's, and we work kind of trying to prioritise our urgent patients, so our pregnant patients or our patients who have been diagnosed with a cancer and need a genetic result quickly, we prioritise them. So huge changes in how we work as well. But I'm really impressed by how much we've been able to adapt, and I think that the era of telemedicine and doing a lot more things kind of virtually and over the telephone is going to stick around. So we've learned a lot from it, definitely.
Thank you. And it is insightful to know how people can do their different roles during a pandemic. Okay, so we have a few questions left, so I'm going to ask the speakers to just try and keep answers just a bit brief so we can cover them. We've got one here. Oh no, I've lost it now. Okay, so this is from Holly. So she said she recently left her PhD in microbiology after being there from September, assuming last year, due to it not being for her, and due to a variety of other circumstances. But she's worried about how she can explain this to future employers. So do you have any suggestions about how she can speak to employers about gaps in her career?
Sorry, just unmuting myself. I wouldn't say I have a huge amount of experience in doing that, but I would say that for me, I just think honesty is the best policy. I know that when for various personal reasons during my training, I didn't finish in exactly the position I'd hoped to finish in. And that was something that I did have to discuss with my future employer. And I was just honest about the things that had happened and how that had impacted me. I think that, people are more than willing to accept that, there are things outside of your control sometimes that happen. And as long as you're open about them and, you're sort of willing to move forward in a positive way, I think that can only be well received, really.
Yes, I definitely agree. Just about being honest, and I guess learning from the experience as well, learning from the fact that, it wasn't for you. So what can I now do to ensure that I know that this particular path that I'm, or this career or this job that I'm applying for is for me. And sometimes, you may have the answer, you may not, but I guess just as Karimah said, just being honest and just using every opportunity as a learning curve, and just grasping whatever you can learn from it. Yeah, that's what I will add.
I'm just going to very briefly agree. Reflection is a huge part of anyone's job. So the things that I would think of if we're trying to kind of work out how to express that are, what would I keep about that experience? What would I introduce to that experience to change it? What could I develop and what would I stop? So trying to think about maybe what are the things that worked well and what didn't, because that's going to be the kind of things that you want to reflect on. So I find kind of that kind of structured approach quite helpful, especially if it's a bit emotive.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have a question. I missed this out. Apologies to Taman. I think Alice did cover this in one of her responses, but it was about the LinkedIn. So how do you reach out on LinkedIn? As in, how would you write to the person?
I literally had someone write to me just before I started doing this talk, actually. I replied to him afterwards. I just have a look on LinkedIn, and you can see what anyone does, anyone who's in a similar field or something that you're interested in. Aderonke got in touch with me on LinkedIn. Just literally send a message and just say, introduce yourself, who you are, and just have a chat. I don't think there's a right or wrong way to do it, but I think it's one of those platforms that, we're all on it to sort of, yes, to sort of showcase what we do, and make connections, but make connections with various people, and not necessarily those who are in the positions that we want to get to, but with people in general. So as I said, I've had someone today message me about his early journey in embryology, and I'm more than happy to reply. So I would say just jump in and send a message, and go from there.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Karimah's just said. You just have to go for it. You will get some people that may ignore you. You may get an outright no. It's happened. Or you might get, people who are really interested. Like, for example, we contacted Karimah and Alice over LinkedIn, and they were happy to, come on and speak. And so you will get quite a lot of people who were interested in speaking with people, providing insight, and helping you as much as possible. But the only thing you can do is actually go forward and contact them and ask them, because they don't know that you need help. You're the only one that's going to know that you need help, and you need to kind of just bite the bullet, reach out to whoever you need to reach out, and whoever gets back to you gets back to you. And if no one gets back to you, then you just keep trying. But there will be someone who will get in contact with you, and who will try and help you as much as they can. And yeah, so I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, nothing further to add except to just go for it. You can find out new opportunities that way. They might say to you, I'm busy, but try this person. So you never know where it's going to lead. There's no harm. Nothing bad is going to happen if they don't reply. So definitely give it a go. And I'm happy to be messaged if people want to chat more.
Thank you so much, ladies. Just want to let everyone know we're going to be running over probably a few minutes, so I hope that's okay. If you need to go, then that's fine. We won't hold you to it, but we have 2 more questions, and then we'll definitely be closing in a few minutes. I have a question here from Narina. She said, "Thank you for the great talks. Did you, by any chance, know anything about going into science communication, so writing articles for general public?" She currently has a PhD. Currently a PhD student in bioengineering, and previously got a BSc and MRES in biomedical sciences. Does anyone know anything about science communications? Feel free to just let us know.
It's not something I've done myself, but Bio News, which is sort of a charity run, I think Sarah Norcross is the sort of lead person there to contact, and they run essentially a science communications charity. They have online events, but also they have sort of weekly entries into an online science communications system, and you just register with them, and you can produce bits of writing for them, and work for them as part of their charity. So I would say have a look, Google them, and get in touch. They're always willing to have new volunteers, and they're an amazing team. So that would be my advice.
Medcoms is definitely something that we're trying to get more insight in within Life Science Connexions. So we will be reaching out to more people, getting more information about Medcoms. One thing we have done is we have signed up for a newsletter with Medcoms. It's actually just called Medcoms, and they provide they actually run webinars as well, and they post jobs in their newsletters, and they just give more insight into medical communications and things like that. So I will probably post a bit more on our socials in regards to Medcoms, but if you want to get the link or get in touch with this company, send us an email, send us a message on LinkedIn, and I'll send you the details so that you can sign up for their newsletter as well.
I would say Bio News, I'm familiar with Sarah Norcross and everything that she's doing, which I think is brilliant. Maybe think about things like Health Education England. So I was part of the Genomics Education Program. They were really keen for people who wanted to get involved and write blog posts. So I've definitely done that before. I think the power of social media is huge. So my friend Phil started it's called like Clinical Phil or something. He started an Instagram basically about bio. He does biochemistry. So he just started it off his own back. He posts pictures of different things he's learning about. And over a few years, he's gathered a few thousand followers. And that's kind of got him into different things. So if there's an area of science that you're really passionate about or something you want to share, then the social media world is your oyster, lobster, whatever you say. And you could maybe start a blog or start an Instagram page and see where that leads you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Just got a few messages about just in regards to that question. So you can contact the IBMS, so that's the Institute of Biomedical Science. And for AGPT students and those who are interested, they can contact one of our speakers who is here, Asha, and she can speak to you on LinkedIn and forward you any relevant individuals. Okie dokie. Last question. Thank you so much for your patience, everyone. I'm not sure if this is, I'm trying to think if this is for everyone, but if this does apply to you, feel free to answer. When it comes to working with children in a hospital environment, would you say that having experience talking to children through volunteering or part-time job is necessary, or can you still work in the pediatric field without that experience?
I think work experience in any situation is valuable if you can get it. At the end of the day, somebody looking at applications needs as many things as possible to try and, you know, distinguish. If you've got two people who are very similar in terms of their qualifications, etc., you know, it's just something that can help you stand out. So if it's an option, if you're able to get it, I think it's always a positive, not only from an employment point of view, but for yourself as well, and to actually see yourself in that environment and to see whether that genuinely works for you, to see whether you enjoy it, to see whether it's something that you do want to go into. Because I think it's quite difficult to base your decision on what field to go into on sort of the theoretical aspects of the job. So I think from standing out and, you know, employment point of view, but also from a personal point of view as well, just that kind of confirmation within yourself. And also it's just a really valuable thing to do. You know, volunteering is just, you know, you can just provide such an amazing outlook for, you know, whichever range of people you are interacting with. So I think if it's possible, then it's always a beneficial thing to do.
Yes, I agree with Karimah. I don't really have much experience dealing with children in a hospital environment, but I guess, you know, if dealing with children is something that you want to do, then definitely 100% get some experience with, you know, how to interact with them, especially within a hospital environment. I have a 5-year-old, and she's developed this fear of hospitals. I don't know where she's gotten that from, but, you know, why I bring that up is that, you know, some kids have this preconceived idea of what hospitals are, or what, you know, the dentist, maybe they've watched something on television and, you know, a child was scared, and that's now, you know, they've taken on that fear. So I think it's just about trying to yes, get experience with dealing with them, and also understand that, you know, you're going to have to deal with these sort of things as well, and that and just kind of understand that you're going to have to try and break down at these fears, you know, if we're to call them, or their understanding of the hospital, and just try to help them and ease them in to the environment as well, so that they can be calm and they can be comfortable. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just going to agree with everyone, and also say getting that experience in a safe environment where you're volunteer and you're looked after is really important, because sometimes it can be challenging to work with children who are poorly. So it's a really good way of kind of getting a bit of exposure in a safe way, and seeing how you cope with that and how that feels for the future, before you end up in a position where you might be having to make difficult decisions, or you know, having to take more responsibility. So I think as a first step, just to help you get exposed to some of those things. I also found it a pure joy on a Saturday morning. It was my favorite thing to do. So, yeah.
Thank you, everyone. And I believe that's all the questions. So thank you guys so much for the session. Thank you for your time. Just before I hand over to Aderonke to close, I just want to quickly share just our socials for anyone who's interested in keeping up with us. If you haven't already followed us on LinkedIn or Facebook, you can just, our details are here. So we've got an email address. If you want it, feel free to email us. We're on Facebook at Life Science Connexions, LinkedIn, Life Science Connexions, Twitter, Life Sci Connexions, and I'm also on Instagram at Life Science Connexions. Just remember, there's an X in the connections. So that's for anyone who wishes to keep up with us about what we're doing. We're constantly sharing relevant jobs and opportunities for people to basically get, especially for graduates as well and students, getting that experience and getting that foot door. So those are our socials. Obviously, as I said, we'll share slides and everything. Sorry, I didn't mention this before. We will share the slides as well, and a couple of bits of information from some of our speakers as well. So thank you very much, and over to you, Ronke.
Yeah, so thank you for hanging in there. We are 6 minutes over. But yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much to our speakers, Alice and Karimah. We really appreciate the information that you've provided, the insight as well. We are hoping to have more sessions like this. So, keep an eye out on our socials. I will be sending out, along with the slides, a feedback form. So could you kindly fill it in, send it back to us so that we can make these sessions as helpful as possible. And you can just share with us if there's anything that we need to change, or if there's anything you would like us to include, or or if there's just anything that you just want to share with us. So we'll be sending that through to you. Just like Tolu said, make sure you follow us on our socials. We're going to try and be a bit more active on Instagram. So you might want to keep an eye out on Instagram. And yes, again, thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, that's the end of our second session. So feel free you can leave the call now if you'd like to. And yeah, we'll definitely be in touch with you all shortly.